everybody. Today we're going to learn how to make pour over coffee. If we want to take a look at the materials that we need here. So we have a gooseneck kettle, which we use to kind of control pouring the hot water over the grinds. We have a grinder. We have a Chemex flask here for brewing, a filter. We have our coffee beans, a scale, something to measure water with, 2 bowls, and a timer, which you can just kind of use your phone as a timer. Couple of quick things. So all together, I would say this probably costs less than $50, and it will make a better tasting cup of coffee than most coffee pots, which cost $200 to $300. And the key to making good pour over coffee is being consistent. So it's really important to have scales, timers, and different systems so that way you can kind of produce the same result each time. So we're going to go through each step and we're going to make some delicious coffee here today. It is definitely a little bit more time consuming than throwing everything in the regular coffee pot, but if you have some more time in the morning, on the weekend, or recently we've kind of had a modified schedule, we've been working inside, it's a great time to learn how to brew some pour over coffee. So here we go. So the first step is to make sure that we use high quality filtered water. Coffee is 90% water, so if we have tap water or something that's not going to taste good, it's going to affect the quality of our coffee. So we just use a zero filter from Bed Bath & Beyond, but you can really use Brita or bottled water or anything that's high quality. So for this recipe, we're going to use 600 milliliters of water. So I've already kind of filled up the gooseneck kettle here. This is the last remaining section. So I'm going to add that to the kettle. And we added an extra 50 milliliters of water in there just to kind of account for spillage, and we're also going to have to prime our filter a little bit later on. So if you're going to make a recipe for 600 milliliters, maybe put an extra 50 milliliters in there to account for that. So our water's ready to go. We're going to boil it. So we're going to leave that there. It's going to sit for a few minutes until it reaches boiling temperature. And again, the theory here is that when you use a regular coffee machine, it doesn't heat the water high enough to fully extract all of the flavor from the coffee. By boiling the water and then allowing it to cool for exactly 1 minute, you're reaching about 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the ideal temperature for fully extracting the coffee flavor out of the beans. So that's kind of the theory behind it. So while that's heating up, we're going to work on our coffee grinds, which we've already kind of chopped up in our electric grinder. They say that after 15 minutes of grinding coffee, 90% of the aroma and essential oils start to break down as a result of oxidation. So really you want to try to keep your coffee in a sealed container for as long as possible in the whole bean form. As soon as you chop it into a powder, there's more air attacking it, and as air is touching it, it starts to break down and it affects the quality of the coffee. So a lot of people online talk about different types of grinds. I don't really get that crazy. I just try to make it as fine and consistent as possible. So we're going to take our scale and we're going to use another bowl here. So we're going to zero balance the scale. So we put the bowl on and we just hit the zero balance button. So that way the scale doesn't account for the weight of the bowl. And then for our recipe, I like to use a 15:1 ratio. So we have 600 milliliters of water. So 600 divided by 15 is 40. So nice and simple. You can just use a calculator for that. That's the ratio of 15 milliliters of water for every gram of coffee. So we're just going to kind of fill this up until we hit 40 grams and we know exactly how much coffee to use. And again, the most important thing when making pour over coffee is being consistent and using timers and scales and things like that. So there we go. So we have 40 grams of coffee. So that's all the coffee we'll need. And now we have to wait for our water to boil. Okay, so we've brought the water to a boil, which is about 212 degrees Fahrenheit. We're gonna turn off the heat and we're gonna start our timer for 1 minute. We're gonna let that cool for exactly 1 minute, which brings it down to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty much the ideal temperature for brewing coffee. While we're waiting for that minute, we're gonna prime the filter. So we have the filter in the Chemex and we're just gonna put a little tiny droplet of water here on the filter to wet it. And again, this is why you don't really need a gooseneck kettle. I mean, you can use a regular one, but it's just harder to be precise when kind of priming and when making the coffee. So we let the water run through here. This also kind of heats up the glass a little bit. So we have that there. Our filter's ready. I'm gonna grab the coffee. Okay, so 1 minute's up. And now the next step is we don't just start pouring the water over the grinds. We have to let them aerate for the first 30 seconds. So step one is we pour the hot water on the coffee grinds to cover them. And you put just enough water to cover them, and then you're gonna time again for about 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And what now is, there's a lot of really acidic gases that are escaping by letting it sit here for 30 seconds or so. After that 30 seconds is up, then you can start pouring and really brewing the coffee. But the point here is to try to preserve the quality of the taste by letting those acidic gases escape for about 30 to 45 seconds. So now we will continue our pour over. I like to start in the middle and then just kind of work my way outward. You want to try and make sure that you're hitting all the grinds evenly. And again, this is another benefit of the pour over as opposed to the standard coffee shower, is that you can make sure that you're hitting all of the grinds with precision, as opposed to that shower head, which is just kind of pouring down and arbitrarily hitting the coffee grinds. And as the water level drops, we want to continue to add more hot water. You can kind of target the sides here a little bit and keep pushing the grinds down into the middle. But the goal is to kind of maintain a consistent water level as the coffee is brewing. So if you take a look inside the Chemex here, you can see that the grinds are all pretty smooth and look to be the same size. If you don't grind the coffee well after you brew it, you will notice that there are big chunks. Sometimes there's beans in there and things like that. So this is a good sign that we made a good brew. We're gonna take it out. And you're pretty much all set to go to enjoy a nice, delicious cup of pour over coffee.